It is not the strongest that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Now, this quote comes from Charles Darwin, as it's shown there, and was mentioned quite some time ago. But I can't help but think that it's so relevant in the environment that we're all working in and living in right now. And in particular, how we are responding to this change, how we are asking our employees to respond to this change. As leaders, as HR professionals, how are we guiding our organizations as we respond to this change so that there is that resurgence when we come out of this period? And this is something that I'm going to be using Mercer's data and analysis on organizations' response to this change. And I'd like to share with you today analysis that comes from our global talent trends research that was conducted at the end of 2019. I'd like to share with you research that is ongoing. It was launched in March, and we're constantly capturing analysis on organizations' response to change. And then I'm also going to share with you and hopefully inspire you with some analysis and some examples of what organizations are thinking about when themselves up for success coming out of this period of significant change. So my name, as mentioned, is Alastair Hall. I'm the commercial leader for career products within Mercer in Europe. I've been, for the past 10 years, speaking to HR leaders on topics relating to the employee experience, employee value proposition, workforce analytics, performance management, and building effective HR business partners. And what I'm going to share with you today is analysis coming from Mercer's point of view. And there is a common trend that threads through all of this. And we'll, as I mentioned, we will conclude with some practical ways companies are taking action amidst this time of change. But before I get into that, maybe a bit of a background to Mercer as an organization. Some of you may be familiar with Mercer, others may not. So Mercer is part of MARSH and MCLENNAN companies, which consists of Oliver Wyman, who focus on management consulting, MARSH within insurance broking, Guy Carpenter with risk and reinsurance, and of course Mercer, who is a global HR consulting organization with revenues over $5 billion with 25,000 colleagues across the globe, and we're impacting 115 million lives through the work and the impact that we deliver. I'd like to begin with looking into a data point that came from our global talent trends research that was conducted towards the end of 2019. So it was pre the current pandemic that we're all experiencing. And the data point was rather concerning because it comes from analysis or feedback from executives. The global talent trends research captured input from over 7,300 voices. And those voices were from frontline staff, they were from HR, they were from the C-suite. And what we saw was that when asked the question about how much do you believe your workforce can adapt to the new world of work, only 45% of executives believed that their workforce could adapt to this new world of work. Now, here we are amid this COVID pandemic, and it's been forced upon us to adapt, to react, to respond to that change. So we really hope that we do see that needle shift on this as organizations think through how they are going to adapt in the most effective way. But that was looking at analysis from as I said, to 2019. And as we take a more near time view, a more recent view from research and a survey that was launched on the 18th of March this year, we covered 1,600 companies through this survey. About 200 were in Europe. And you can see the ranges of the size of organizations and where those organizations were headquartered. And we really wanted to understand very early on, amidst the COVID pandemic, how are companies supporting their employees right now? And I'm going to draw on here some specific European results to give you that perspective on response to change. Some of the findings were quite surprising. Others, were kind of in line with our assumptions. Nonetheless, I hope they give you a perspective to inform some of the decisions and actions that you may be considering. To begin with, the left-hand side here, what we're seeing, 88% of companies close their offices and factories or retail outlets. And when we think about the lockdowns that are prevalent across most countries right now, not too surprised to see that number there. And on the right-hand side, what we can see, 36% of companies instituted a hiring freeze. Now, what was interesting about this data point is that when we took a closer look into this, and particularly as with Mercer, we were running a lot of local surveys in various countries across the globe. And some of the questions were asked about that topic of hiring freeze, and the roles that were left open were particularly around the critical roles, often roles that are really hard to fill, that critical talent required, particularly the talent that's required for resurgence back to growth. But more broadly, looking beyond this, just to capture here some of the arrangements that European organizations in particular were taking in response to the outbreak. Now, what you can see here in the responses were, well, first of all, what stood out for us was, of course, a hold or a ban on travel. Okay, cancelling international travels, cancelling domestic travel. Yeah, pretty not surprising. But the theme coming out here is the provision around adaptive work, the need to really get things in order for this remote work situation that is now taking place. When you consider activities such as 67% of organizations providing work from home playbooks, implementing flexible working hours, allowing employees to use leave as and when it's needed. This adaptive work, as one colleague put it, the world's largest flexible working experiment that is taking place right now. Organizations needed to have their necessary resources in place. Now, for anyone on the line who, when they see providing work from home playbooks, this is something that is used quite broadly from many organizations, and Mercer has a lot of content relating to these themes and these tactical ways which can help organizations from templates. So please don't hesitate after this call to get in touch, and we can make that available to you. And of course, it's worth noting that this survey, where we're drawing these insights from for our call, is still ongoing. And so you can still participate. And again, the results, we are constantly being updated. So whilst I'm showing you results now, as we look at these results 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, the trends that we're seeing are constantly going to change. So this is very much a snapshot of what we're seeing as a result of the initial analysis that we've done. So let's take a view on what were the responses around pay. Massive concern for employees right now around, of course, job security and, of course, their pay. So very much top of mind for a lot of employees. So let's take a look and shine a light on what our research was saying and what our research told us around, well, what are companies actually doing? What are they telling us they're doing in relation to various components relating to pay? The question here was around how are you handling merit increases? And as you can see, 68% of organizations, the vast majority, are continuing as planned. So no change. What we planned, we're going to follow through with. 26% delaying or considering a delay. And 6%, you can see there, freezing. What about employees who need to work on site? How are organizations affecting making changes to their pay plan design? Well, you can see the start or the emergence of a similar story here. 88% of salaried staff, regular rate. 61% of hourly staff there, regular rate. The increased rate, only 10% for salaried and hourly paid staff. And now those increased rates included straight increase, overtime increase, special bonuses, and hazard pay. And then, of course, you can see that 35%, 9% not applicable. So again, lots of concern about this, lots of worry. The response from our survey is that actually not much change is taking place here right now. What about European companies paying employees who are not diagnosed with COVID-19, but they're simply not able to work? And there are a number of reasons why this is the case. When we think about how our lives have been impacted, work and home, whether we are homeschooling, dealing with relatives, and whatever it may be, how are organizations reacting to this? Well, you can see the majority of companies, they've not implemented any changes to employee pay, even when unable to work. And it's almost a mirror image, salaried and hourly staff. Very little difference there between the two. Staying on the topic of pay, simply because this is an area that is, as we will see, a big concern for employees. Well, what actions? What is it that companies are doing, particularly in Europe, who have no work due to a partial or full closure of business? And again, what do we see here? Majority of companies, they're not implementing changes to compensation, even during partial or full business closure. So this is very much that trend that we've seen now continually through the results that we're capturing in our survey. And keeping in mind job security as well, what we've seen from our survey here is that only a few companies are currently laying off employees, regardless of salaried or hourly status. So this European perspective that I'm presenting here is telling us that story of actually there's not a great deal of change taking place within the pay structure there. So what kind of monetary support are European organizations giving frontline employees, if any at all? Well, you can see 70% of organizations are giving no additional support. 21%, some form of payout of sales incentives or commissions. And you can see listed on this slide here, that's based on achievement against an adjusted target, or, full payout regardless of achievement, or partial payout regardless of achievement. 7% of suspended work, and 3% of European companies are giving that additional allowance. So it's quite interesting to see just from, and again, it's a snapshot, it's a point in time. As we were to capture the analysis, if we were to run it in a week's time, the results may be different, 2 weeks time, 3 weeks time. But as I started, this is responding to change. We're very much in this period of unknown, but this is at least how organizations broadly, from our analysis, 1,600 organizations across the globe are reacting. And why they're participating, why companies are wanting that analysis is there's an eye on resurgence. There's an eye on that recovery. And this is where I wanted just to spend a few moments with you and sharing with you a framework and pose some questions around topics to consider, what we are seeing organizations consider and prioritize, opportunities to set ourselves up for that resurgence, to have that engine fully revved so that when the recovery sets, we are in the most effective position. We are setting ourselves up for that return to growth. And it comes into three categories: respond, return, and reinvent. Now, they're not sequential. Companies can focus and be in any one of these stages. But what I'd like to do is just take you through each one, and just pose some thoughts, suggestions, and ideas. And we'll start with respond. So what are the things that we need to think about during this stage of respond? And it's very much thinking about, are we going to be proactive? Are we going to be reactive? Will you take action to meet those unprecedented challenges of the pandemic, or will you simply react to what is coming your way? What we see is that proactive companies, they will benefit by implementing change on many fronts, whether it be from adaptive working, as we've mentioned, or restructuring benefits, providing virtual support for employee health and well-being. Now, beyond the immediate cost containment and liquidity actions, the question that we're often asking our clients is, what steps should you be taking to ensure business continuity? And you can see some of the other elements listed there around health and safety, communication and welfare, social outreach. So taking a look now into the return phase. Now, when we consider this return phase within this framework of recovery, we take into account the fact that as the virus spread slows down, people and businesses will be starting to return back to normal. But what will work look like? Does this provide us with that opportunity to help us adapt as quickly as possible? When we think about shaping that employee experience, this very much is an opportunity to embrace that and maximize on that, and understand what is it that employees really are craving and how are they going to go about their work. How can we create that experience that maximizes engagement, that does then drive productivity and performance? So, balancing that economics with empathy in decision making, that's what's going to be crucial, particularly as we are involved in those tough decisions that are coming. So very much focus here is wanting to preserve employees' health and well-being and support their financial wellness, and to stay connected to your people in those moments that truly matter. So at the heart of this, of course, is that employee experience. You can see elements down here: productivity and metric realignment, executive plan design adjustments, employee experience revisions as well. And finally, the reinvent stage. So this particular phase, when we think about what disruption brings, innovation is really comes from these moments of disruption. The greatest innovations we've seen have been when disruption has occurred. So no doubt there is a tremendous amount of opportunity here. It's a time to reflect and reset and very much reinvigorate. When we think about those changing in demands that are affecting all of us around the world, companies are going to have to reinvent themselves, at the same time hold true to their core purpose. Innovation and differentiation are going to require us thinking more and re-examining our business models, adopting more sustainable practices, and adapting to these new ways of working. the way we embrace digital solutions and how that's enabling us to prepare for the future of work are all considerations and things that organizations are very much at the front of minds of leaders right now. And it's very much your chance to reaffirm this within your organization and to see, with this level of change, with this need to respond, this is the moment to really put your mark on that process and within your organization. This very much is that crucible time for all of us, where we look at those very difficult challenges that we're facing, and to see, what is that impact we're going to be delivering. But fundamentally, it's operating constantly with empathy in mind. This has been something that's been in the heart of Mercer's point of view, particularly when we looked at the theme of our global talent trends research. Winning with empathy was very much at the center of that. And we considered the analysis, as mentioned, of over 7,000 voices across that research, and wanting to understand more about the challenges facing frontline staff, facing HR leaders, and of course the executive. And the feedback or the concerns that were top of mind for CHROs right now are listed here. And when you look at this list, you see health and safety, communication, defining and deploying expanded benefit programs. There's very much this trend, and I can't help but think back to the core fundamentals, the basics, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you will, getting those core basics in place. When we look at Mercer's approach and models here, we're very much seeing that picture play out. If we were having a conversation about maybe about your EVP or your employer brand, maybe 3 months ago, the theme of purpose is really top of mind, and that's really what organizations were driving towards. And even today, just most recently, employers have been focused on rewards very much right now. But now is the time for them to step back and to address those core fundamentals. There's a distinct need to look at those employee concerns, because this is what's top of mind for them. When we look at those basic fundamentals that needs to be in place, because if they're not, what science tells us is that we've got this scarcity concept creeping in. And when scarcity creeps in, employees start going through tunneling. Now, what tunneling means is that they're simply unable to focus until those core fundamentals have been addressed. So as employers, there's a tremendous amount of risk here. If these aren't addressed, we've got a huge duty of care here to think, well, if we're not addressing those core fundamentals, then of course we're impacting our employees' health and their well-being, but also their inability to be productive, to be fully engaged. And that's going to be crucial when we go through the recovery and get to turn the business around, ready for resurgence. And this is largely what's happening right now with the corona pandemic. Whether these threats are real or perceived, the foundations for our employees, they've been unraveled, and people are feeling really insecure. So employers, we've got a huge role to play in helping bring some stability to our workforce. That's why it's really important that we keep our employees fully engaged and focused on that turnaround. It's actually a huge risk if we don't focus on that employees are going to think, well, as organizations, we're completely out of touch with reality and completely out of touch with their needs right now. So what are some of the things that we can do? This is so crucial. What are some of the actions companies are taking? What are we observing? What would be Mercer's view relating to this? And there's a distinct need here around getting connected and really understanding and knowing what your employees truly care about. But unfortunately, what we've learned is that very few organizations, only 14% of employees, are conducting some form of internal survey, whether that be an interview, whether that be some sort of focus group to understand how their employees are feeling. Now is the time, without doubt, to be focusing on this, to take that empathetic approach. This theme of empathy is throughout so much of the work that we're doing. It is one of the core experiences that employees are looking for. Our point of view when it comes to the employee experience very much focuses on experiences that are enriching, experiences that are embracing. Employees are craving these core experiences right now. An experience that makes me efficient in what I do. And then finally, and arguably the most important right now, is the experience of empathy. Do you really understand and care and get where I am right now? And here, what I'm presenting is a straightforward 4-step plan, which around an employee listening program, which could be useful as you think about, how is COVID-19 affecting your organization? What are employees concerned about? What's the best way to listen to employees? And how can you respond expediently to concerns? These are core ways which can be used to help you drive that level of connection and understanding to then react to it. Because as I keep talking about, empathy is such a critical aspect right now. And it starts with listening, and it starts with then addressing what those employee concerns are. Now, what you're seeing here is on the left-hand side, you're seeing some insights from employee research that was collected across employees from all different organizations and industries. Now, what stands out here is that employees are clearly concerned with the impact of remote work and the potential economic fallout. And that's blatantly obvious from what you can see from this analysis. Now, let's keep in the back of our minds the findings from our survey that was recently conducted. Because what's striking is that though employees are concerned about economic fallout and layoffs and pay reductions, employees are really, as we've seen, not considering it. So how can we then connect more to those employees if we know those are the concerns and this is the reality? What can we do? What are those approaches that can help us increase our listening and connectivity? Well, digital focus groups are really low cost, highly effective way and very quick way of understanding what employees care about in a very authentic, very actually a completely anonymous environment, allowing for that very comfortable user experience and instant feedback in terms of real-time results. Very powerful tools there. Manager and team dialogue, very straightforward, open dialogue, simple things, ask me anything sessions, really help employees feel more supported and encourage supporting one another. And of course, pulse surveys, which are widely used to assess employee experiences, perceptions and sentiments. The one caveat on pulse surveys we would say is have a purpose. Don't do the survey for doing a survey's sake. Engagement is not the outcome that organizations are seeking. It's think more broadly around those business implications and how employee engagement, maximizing on that employee experience, is going to help us get to that business outcome. Having a purpose and what we would call running a pulse with a purpose is crucial in that process. For any one of these areas, Mercer has a full and extensive range of support, which we'd be more than happy to speak to anybody about in relation to this, and both how we're seeing organizations respond and, of course, the support we can deliver. And finally, I thought I'd share with you some approaches Mercer colleagues have been embracing as we work through this time, as we look forward to every day and face it with some with some very practical habits, if you will, from whether it's being about having a good laugh or having the habit of daily kindness or just simply getting physical with our exercise. All these things are helping each other work and get through this in the most effective way. And that really concludes my presentation. So with that, I would like to say thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope it has been useful. Please do reach out to me on LinkedIn, or my contact details I'm sure will be shared. I'm more than happy to take any questions or discuss any topics further. Back over to you, Yuris.
Thank you, Alastair. That was a very, very deep presentation, a lot of information to cover. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We have few questions. We don't have much time, so basically you already gave us some advices, like some possibilities that companies can do in this situation, what others already are doing, moving back to basics, trying to find out what the employees actually need, and try to understand them a bit better. But if I have to ask you, what would be the top one thing that any company should think about at the moment, like dropping off all the rest, but what should be every company's one most important concern at the moment that you could advise our viewers at the moment?
I think that's a great question, a tough question. But I think I'd go back to that theme of empathy. I think, there are some difficult times that are ahead. There's a tremendous amount of unknown that everyone is dealing with. There are so many different avenues and roads and choices we're going to take, and the decisions that leaders are going to be making are going to have big implications. And at times, you think that no one is going to have the crystal ball into the future. Fundamentally, the principle to go back on, I think, is that empathy, and think through the actions and operate in a way with people at the center and have empathy in the forefront is the one thing I would say that overrides everything.
Thank you. Another question, previously in this presentation, we already covered a lot of comparing between Latvia and Lithuania, and we like to compare ourselves in order to feel in order to understand where we are. If you see the whole picture, can you already see that? What is the feeling that most of the companies are feeling more positive by the end of will feel more positive by the end of April, or we should wait until the June when we can see the actual difference?
That's a again interesting one. I think there's definitely a feeling of, or an observation of, optimism right now, and optimism being appreciating the fact that yes, this is very difficult that we're in right now, but knowing that there will be difficult times that we will be getting through. But the feeling, I don't have a data point that would say on when. Is it April? Is it June? Is it May? But I think what is overriding is the sense of optimism and that focus on, we are going to be having to deal with limited information right now, because, as I said, no one is going to have that perspective moving forward. But how the feeling of we will return and there will be that return to growth is on, and you can see it in so many organizations with CEOs commenting in the press these days on this topic, that it's very much there and on the forefront, that strong feeling of optimism. But fortunately, I don't have a specific time frame. Is it April, May, June to share?